Hi there, I'm Anna McKinley and welcome to my channel. I'm on a mission right now to bring you 100 pieces of great content over 100 days, all with the aim of helping you live a life that is healthy and happy and rewarding. So what I'm focusing on at the moment is bringing you a series of short, focused, practical episodes to help you be resilient, because let's face it, we need that right now in the world. There's so much going on. It's been a roller coaster of a year already, 2020, and there's more on the horizon with everything happening in the world right now. So what I would like to share with you is actually, as human beings, all of us are so much more resilient than most of us realize, and that includes you. You may have heard this quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. It's one of my favorites. She once famously said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. She was such a wise, wise person, because actually that statement also applies to other feelings. No one can make you feel inferior, anxious, angry, frustrated, or any of these things without your consent. In the last few episodes, I've been talking a bit about this notion of personal responsibility, and the concept that actually we can interpret that as meaning that we have the ability, each of us, to choose how we respond to things. And so I'd like to share with you some quite practical insights and simple methods that you can use to actually implement that in your life right now, so that you can have a smoother emotional ride in your life. How does that sound to you? Well, if you're on board with that, let's do it. And this is actually based on the science. Jill Bolte Taylor, who is a well-known author and neuroscientist, shares this about our emotional system, because our feelings are part of our neurological system. It's all part of our neurocircuitry. And our feelings are not stimulated by people, they're stimulated by us. Specifically, our feelings are stimulated by our thoughts. So this is how it works. We have a thought, and then we have an emotional response to that thought, and then that triggers our physiological response. So the way that tends to happen is, depending on the emotion, our brain triggers the release of certain chemicals in our body that will give us physical feelings, physical symptoms. So an example of that might be feelings of anxiety will tend to be associated with symptoms like my palms get sweaty, my heart rate goes up, I start breathing fast and shallow, I have a funny feeling in my stomach. These kinds of things are actually the physical results of certain chemicals being released by our brain. So the science around it. Now, the thing is, as Jill Bolte Taylor says, that, actually my neurocircuitry is my neurocircuitry. You can't stimulate it. It's part of me. It's internal to me. So you cannot stimulate my neurocircuitry without my permission. And the same goes for you. Your neurocircuitry is your neurocircuitry. And no one else and nothing else can stimulate it without your permission. So how come we end up feeling all of these feelings? Well, it's because without realizing it, we're giving consent. We're going along with the process, right? So remember the process, the 3 steps. We think a thought, we have an emotional response to that thought, and it triggers this physiological, biochemical feeling in our bodies. Well, here's a really powerful nugget of information for you. It takes less than 90 seconds for this whole process to complete. We have a thought, the emotional response, the biochemical response. That will all flush through our system and dissipate in less than 90 seconds. You're probably thinking, you're kidding. That's clearly not true. I can stay frustrated, angry, anxious for hours, days even. Well, yes, we do. But that's because if we keep repeating the same thought, we keep starting the process off over and over again. So we get into a loop. If we can catch it and not feed that thought, then the feeling will dissipate. And this is where the real power is. So the science tells us, bottom line, that no one and nothing has the ability to trigger your emotions unless you play along with it. That goes for all of us. But by thinking and continuing to think the same thoughts that trigger the emotions, that's when we sustain those emotions. Now, this goes for positive as well as negative. Who want to stay happy more of the time? Actually starts with practicing turning our attention and our thoughts to things that help us to feel good. We want to stop feeling negative as much of the time. We want to interrupt the thinking patterns that keep the feeling alive. Right? So, well, how do we do that? Because if it was easy, obviously the world would be a very, very different place from what we're seeing right now. So that I can get into that, let me share a real practical, real life situation. And in fact, I was speaking with a client about a similar situation just recently, as I mentioned in yesterday's episode. So imagine in a work situation, maybe in your job or in a business situation, someone says something critical about a piece of work that you've produced. Not a nice experience, right? Because often what happens with people when that happens, the very normal and common response is to have thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I don't measure up, I stuffed up again, maybe even getting into some anxiety. Is this going to impact on my job? Are they going to tell my boss? Or in a business sense, we might go, who else are they going to tell? Am I going to lose customers because of this? Am I going to lose business opportunities because of this? What will other people think? And we can get into a spiral around it, right? And every time we have one of those thoughts, it's triggering the release of chemicals in our body that generate these physical feelings or symptoms, such as feelings around anxiety that I described just before. And as long as we keep thinking those thoughts, we keep just staying in that pattern, and it can go on. So my client who I was speaking with, she was in this kind of pattern for a good day before she actually was able to interrupt the pattern. How did she do it? She shifted her perspective. She short-circuited the thought. She had an aha moment where she went, actually, it's not my stuff. What that person said was not about me. It was actually her stuff that she was just putting onto me. And that change in perspective, she could interrupt the thought pattern and she felt better just about straight away. This is the power that we all have available to us, right? So how do we interrupt the pattern? And let's be really, really blunt. The sooner we interrupt the thinking pattern before we get into this kind of momentum of negativity and this constant loop, if we can keep out of that momentum, it's much, much easier to interrupt the process. So the thing for us to practice, which is a little bit of like building a new muscle, the thing for us to practice is catching the thought. If you can notice when you're going into one of these emotional states that we don't want to be in, I'm anxious, I'm scared, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm sad, whatever it is, catch the thought. Ask yourself, what am I thinking that's causing this response? And then we can actually interrupt the pattern. I'm going to share with you now some tools, because there's a number of ways that we can interrupt that pattern. Yesterday I talked about just getting curious about it. What's another perspective on this situation? What's really going on here? Here are some other alternatives that you can use. We can just simply distract ourselves. Put on some music that you like. Talk to someone about something else. Whatever it is to take our attention away from the thought that's getting us into the emotional cycle. Remember, it just takes 90 seconds for the whole process, if we're not feeding it, for this whole physiological emotional process to dissipate. We just need to keep our attention away from those thoughts for a minute and a half, 90 seconds, that's it. So distraction can work. Another one is just recognizing that, hey, it's just a thought. Just because it's in my head doesn't make it true. Right? So we can actually say to that thought, hey, you're just a thought. I don't believe you're true. We can stand to one side and look at it and go, what are you doing in my head? You're just a thought. Just doing that distances ourselves from it and helps us to interrupt that cycle. Another technique you can use is actually looking for evidence that disproves it. Well, this one person says X, Y, and Z, but I happen to know that others who've worked with them have also received the same kind of thing. Maybe it's not me, maybe it's them, right? As in the story I shared with you just before. Or maybe we can look at it and go, well, what are other pieces of evidence that I can bring to bear that show me that I do good work, or that, whatever it is, that I am good enough. So those are awesome techniques. I'm just going to recap. The first thing is to be aware. Notice when we're getting into that kind of state, and we know it, right? You can tell when you're tipping into a negative emotion of some kind. So rather than letting that momentum build, the personal responsibility approach is to notice it, catch it, and ask yourself, what am I thinking? And interrupt that pattern. Just recap again, get curious, what's another perspective on this? Distract yourself just for long enough to let the feelings dissipate. Recognize that, hey, it's just a thought, that doesn't make it true. Or to actually look for evidence that disproves the thought. Have fun with it, have a play with it. Now more than ever, it's so important for us all to look after our emotional state, because our emotions not only affect the quality of our lives and health, they also impact on those around us. So hey, let's be torchbearers. Let's set an example for people around us that we can actually manage our emotional state, and by so doing you can improve the quality of your life and help others at the same time. So I hope you have fun with that. If you like this content, be sure to subscribe and share it with anyone else you feel would benefit, and I'll see you in the next episode.